What the helly? The protagonist wakes up in his bed in the middle of the night, confused as to why he sees a floating door above him. He stares at it for a while, wondering if it's some kind of magic trick. He opens the door and abruptly falls in. The protagonist looks up and notices another space inside the door. It's so dark that he yells out, asking if anyone is there. As he stares into the void, he hears a thumping noise approaching. No diddy. He sees a gigantic human centipede with 3 glowing green eyes crawling toward him. The protagonist screams and runs back toward the door he fell from. He slams it shut, shouting, "That world is dangerous." As the door closes, it begins to vanish. Suddenly, the protagonist hears a random voice in his head. "Congratulations, human. You have awakened the ability, World Link." Startled, he looks around to see who's talking. The voice assures him not to worry, it's using interdimensional telepathic communication. The voice then tells him to check his backpack. The protagonist finds a golden, evil-looking skull statue inside. The voice says that is the cursed statue of the wicked Ghost King. Someone deliberately placed it near you to curse you, kill you, and steal your soul. But you survived. Confused, the protagonist suddenly feels memories flooding into his mind. The body he's in belonged to a middle schooler named Shinyi. The original owner's soul was destroyed by the statue's curse, and at that very moment, the protagonist had died from overwork in his own dimension. The voice in his head continues, when the curse fails to kill, it grants unimaginable powers, the ability to accumulate millions of souls. The voice tells him to summon the door again. It now belongs to him, thanks to the World Link ability. A system window pops up. Title acquired, Polite Person. Effect: when the user is polite, others will slightly have a better impression of him. The voice in his head says it's running out of strength. Whoever used the cursed statue will return once they realize he's still alive. The protagonist asks why the voice is telling him all of this. The voice responds, "Because I need you. The world you stumbled upon is called the Nightmare Realm, and I'm trapped there. Grow stronger. Reach its depths. Free me and you will be handsomely rewarded." Then the voice disappears. The protagonist wonders who would want to kill him or Shinyi. He didn't see any enemies in Shinya's memories who would want him dead. He makes up his mind he will go through the door again. But first, he equips his new title. Maybe this time he can negotiate with the gigantic human centipede. No, Diddy, the protagonist really does introduce himself to the human centipede and says his name is Shinyi. At the same time, he activates his polite person skill. The human centipede replies with a low growl. The protagonist apologizes for interrupting its meal and says he would like to become friends. The human centipede then rushes at the protagonist as if it wants to join a Diddy party. The protagonist retreats, saying he just wanted to have a little chat. But the human centipede destroys the door, causing the protagonist to fall back onto his bed. I wonder what happens next? Just kidding. The protagonist then notices the door has vanished again and a system window appears. Titles can only be earned once a day. You've already used today's opportunity. Try again tomorrow. The protagonist is frustrated because he can't get past the human centipede and wants to obtain more titles before the person who wants him dead shows up. He re-enters the door and tells the human centipede that he can't get caught because he has the ability to travel between 2 worlds. He just wants to talk. The human centipede seems to listen, then changes its mind and starts walking away. The protagonist notices it is injured and offers to help heal it. The creature stops walking, intrigued. The protagonist says he has calcium pills that can repair bones and offers to give them in exchange for friendship. The human centipede creates a blast of purple light from its hand. Suddenly, a contract appears, an equal exchange agreement for both parties. If either is dissatisfied, they may terminate it. The protagonist signs his name, Shinyi. The contract is complete. In the next scene, a man and a woman are offering their son medicine and something to drink. He has just returned home after being discharged from the hospital. The son thanks his parents. He remembers that in his last life, he grew up in an orphanage, so it feels nice to have someone care for him. Suddenly, there's a knock at the door. 2 police officers enter the home and say they're there about Shunye's case. In the next scene, the police officers explain to the parents that incidents like this occur countless times throughout the year and are unpredictable. Unfortunately, there's nothing they can do. The protagonist thinks to himself, the real Shinyi was killed by some monster summoned by that damn curse. One of the officers looks at the protagonist and says he doesn't have anything to worry about because the hospital will be closing and what happened to him won't happen again. The protagonist looks relieved. The officer adds that they haven't found anyone who might hold a grudge against him. Then the police proceed to leave the home. The protagonist notices that the officers clearly don't want to deal with anything related to the curse. He wonders who would use such a powerful curse against a middle schooler. Mid-thought, the protagonist notices the police officers walking back toward him. One of them hands him a card and says that if anything seems off or abnormal, he should call him directly. The protagonist stares at the card and thinks, not everyone is useless. But then worry creeps in. Whoever is after him must know he's still alive. He's afraid they may go after Shin Ye's family next. He tells himself he needs to get stronger. In the following scene, the protagonist activates his powers to open the magical door. He calls out for the human centipede, saying he brought the calcium tablets. The human centipede notices a tonic in the protagonist's pocket and summons a contract to exchange it for one of his items from his collection of war spoils. A low-tier nightmare crystal crafted by high elves, who were once enemies of the giant skeleton centipede. The crystal can directly instill knowledge, skills, techniques, or intel into the user. The protagonist snaps the crystal, and a system window appears. You have learned Moonlit Deer Walk. This technique allows the user to evade, dash, and sidestep. The protagonist is satisfied. Now he can defend himself. The human centipede collects the tablets and disappears back into the darkness. The protagonist hears a noise and thinks his parents are back, so he says he'd better get back to his room. The system window displays that the first form of Deer Walk, evasion, requires 3 agility points, but the protagonist only has 2. He wonders how he's supposed to increase his agility. As he returns to his room, he hears someone entering through his bedroom window. A mysterious man stands there in disbelief. So it's really true, he says. You're alive. Now I want to see what you're really made of. The mysterious man lunges toward the protagonist with a sharp dagger and a gun in his hand. The protagonist dodges and evades the attack. He is now on high alert. Whoever wants him dead has sent an assassin to finish the job. The protagonist activates his polite skill and asks the assassin, is there something I can help you with? The skill fails and the assassin still tries to kill him. A system window pops up and says, the crystal has granted the protagonist knowledge. In the nightmare realm, skills, techniques, titles, and equipment have their own ranks from lowest to highest. Gray, broken, white, normal, green, excellent, blue, exceptional, and purple, 1 in a million. The higher the rank, the stronger the effect. Your title, polite person, is ranked gray broken. The protagonist starts to get nervous. He can't use his skills and he still can't activate Moonlit Deer Walk. The assassin points his gun at him. Now really panicking, the protagonist sees another system window appear. Titles can be consumed to gain status points. The higher the rank, the more points you receive. Out of breath, the protagonist commands the system to consume the title polite person. Consumption successful. Agility increased. 2-3. Skill unlocked. Moonlit Deer Walk, first form, evasion. The protagonist activates the ability and dashes out the room's door. The assassin follows through the door but finds himself staring into a dark passage. The protagonist appears behind him and says, so long, before slamming the door shut. No Diddy, the human centipede is about to consume the assassin. You hear the assassin screaming, followed by loud crunching noises. The protagonist, now safely back in his room, feels overwhelmed by his near-death experience. Another system window appears. Your sacrifice of a living person has pleased the other party. In accordance with the principle of equivalent exchange, the other party offers items in return. The contract is recognized. Items received: Pale Shadow Crown, Silver War Medal. Pale Shadow Crown, Green, excellent. Imbued with high-level shadow magic from the Gloom Abyss. Allows the wearer to disguise themselves as a member of the elf race. Silver War Medal. A symbol of honor and merit. Wearing it will teleport the wearer to Elven territory. The protagonist puts on the crown and transforms into an elf. Delighted by how adorable he looks, he takes a selfie. Just then he's interrupted by a voice from outside asking, is Shinyi home? The protagonist grows nervous again, wondering if it's yet another assassin. The person behind the protagonist's bedroom door says, it's me, Chinhaoyu. The protagonist realizes it's Shinye's best friend. He shifts back to his normal self and opens the door. Chinhaoyu gives the protagonist a hug while crying hysterically. The protagonist's mother interrupts them to see who's visiting. Startled, the protagonist asks his mother where his father is. She replies that his father went to see his grandfather to get help finding more supertonics. Shin Haoyu tells the protagonist that his parents are really looking out for him and that he should do better in school. The protagonist realizes he missed the first high school exams and feels bummed about it. His mother tells him not to be upset. Although he may have missed the strength test, he still has a chance to get a high score in agility. In this world, exams are different. They don't focus solely on academics but also test physical strength and agility. The protagonist then thinks about how he might not be able to return to school because he's being hunted and would only be putting a target on his back. His mother notices how worried he looks and gives him a heartwarming hug. She tells him that if he doesn't want to take the exams, he doesn't have to. The protagonist brushes it off and tells her he's strong and will go back to school tomorrow. More memories from Shinye's previous life begin to flood his mind. He remembers that Shinye's grandfather is some kind of big shot with a lot of money. However, his parents never asked for his help, which makes the protagonist realize they must have swallowed their pride and begged his grandfather for the expensive supertonic. He feels guilty because their real son is already dead and now he wants to do right by them. The next day, the protagonist reads a book, trying to cram everything he missed while he was hospitalized. A student walks up and tells him that a girl named Zhao Yibing is in the hallway looking for him. The protagonist remembers her from Shan Ye's memories. They were basically friends with benefits. He walks up to Zhao and asks if she was looking for him. She says she heard he came back for the exams and adds that she did well and should get into an elite high school. The protagonist congratulates her, but Zhao suddenly blushes and says she doesn't want him to look for her anymore. The protagonist is confused. Zhao says that eventually they'll part ways, so it's better if they're just friends, nothing more. The protagonist is surprised as he watches Zhao delete his number from her phone. He doesn't think he ever went looking for Zhao in the first place. Other students nearby start gossiping about how Zhao was always all over Xinyi because he had the top scores. Now that he missed an exam, she's dumping him. A female classmate comforts Zhao and tells the protagonist he's a jerk, that Zhao always gave him gifts and he should treat her better. Zhao starts to cry and mutters to herself that she thought they were friends. The protagonist doesn't believe her tears and says that accepting gifts doesn't mean he owes her anything. He tells Zhao that if she really cared about him, she wouldn't have tried to win him over with gifts but would have let him find someone better for him. I wonder what the protagonist means by gifts. The protagonist flips his middle finger at Zhao and says they'll never be friends again and that he'll pay her back for the gifts. The female classmate yells at the protagonist, calling him the worst and a jerk. Other classmates begin to chime in, agreeing that the protagonist is a scumbag and shouldn't play with Zhao's feelings. The female classmate tells Zhao to come with her. Zhao is in disbelief. It now looks like she got dumped when she had wanted to be the one to dump Xinyi. As the protagonist prepares to walk away, a tall, muscular student blocks his path. The protagonist looks up and realizes it's the number 3 top student in the class. The classmate tells the protagonist that things have changed since he's been gone and that he himself has gotten a lot stronger. The protagonist responds, saying he wasn't bothering Zhao and only came because she said she wanted to see him. Suddenly, the protagonist caves in. With teary eyes, he apologizes to Zhao and says, "You win." He then runs away. Zhao notices he's crying and pleads for him not to go. Yeah, this girl really doesn't know what she wants. The strong classmate chases after Xinyi, angry that he didn't give him permission to leave. He tries to hit the protagonist, but Xinyi evades with a somersault and leaps over him. All the classmates are stunned by what just happened, commenting that he looks more agile than before. The protagonist remains cool and says, "I already apologized to Zhao. What more do you want?" A professor suddenly appears out of nowhere and yells at the students, reminding them that the mock exams are about to start and everyone needs to head to the field. The strong classmate glares at Xinyi and says, "This isn't over." Everyone gathers on the field, preparing and stretching. Chen, the protagonist's friend, approaches him and says there's a new comic spot behind the school. The protagonist warmly declines, saying his stomach hurts and he needs to use the restroom. However, that's just an excuse. He wants to be alone to collect his new title. He enters the building, looks around, then rushes into the restroom. But another assassin appears to be following him. The assassin sneaks into the restroom holding a metal pen. As he ventures deeper inside, he becomes confused. The protagonist is nowhere to be found. The next scene shows the protagonist in his elf form walking down a pathway from the door he had opened earlier. He steps on a gun and realizes it's the one from the last assassin, the one who had that ditty party with the human centipede. He picks up the gun and is happy to find it still loaded. Now he has something to defend himself. The protagonist takes out an item and activates it to travel to the elf territory. Suddenly he hears the mysterious voice in his head again. The voice says it no longer has much power left to help but grants the protagonist a human token. Then the protagonist vanishes. The protagonist finds himself sitting on the floor with a pounding headache. He looks at his hand and wonders why the mysterious voice gifted him a dagger. Suddenly, someone shouts, "Who's there?" 3 elves approach the protagonist. One elf calls him Fern and is happy to see him. The other 2 elves say it took him long enough to return. The protagonist plays along and says he had a bit of a hiccup. Then he notices the elves are wearing the same crown as he is. He knows they aren't real elves either. One of the other elves says it doesn't matter that he's late, as long as he's there. The tribe trusts them, so they'll attack at night, kill the chief, and seize the treasures. The protagonist's head starts to hurt again as he touches his crown. The 3 elves yell at him not to do that. They call him an idiot and tell him never to take off the pale shadow crown. If the elves find out the truth, they'll all be dead. The protagonist realizes that the human centipede is Fern and that Fern set him up to do his dirty bidding. The 3 elves rush ahead and tell Fern to come. The protagonist has a hard time keeping up. One elf says they've made it and all they need to do now is show the chief their badge to access the village. The 3 elves tell the protagonist that he has to kill the chief and that they'll cover for him. The protagonist becomes nervous and questions what he just heard. The elves' faces turn cold and they ask why he's backing out. The protagonist plays it off after seeing their death stares and says his blade can't wait to taste blood. The elves return to normal and say, "Good." The protagonist feels like it's a death trap to go through with this job. An elf guard sees the protagonist and lets him in after noticing he has a silver war medallion. He's a soldier from the front lines. The guard shows him the path to the village. The villagers are all welcoming and it feels like he's walked into an episode of Love Island. The guard tells the protagonist that the chief is waiting for him inside. The rest of the fake elves say they'll wait outside. The protagonist walks through the door and sees the chief sitting and reading a book. The chief closes the book, glares at the protagonist, and says, "Welcome, soldier, from the front lines." A system window pops up, stating that the protagonist's skill, door, has the ability to analyze the titles of other beings. A bright purple light appears, revealing the many titles the elf chief holds. The protagonist feels embarrassed. He only has the title polite person. He already feels defeated and starts to shiver. The village chief thanks the protagonist for his service and tells him to rest well in the village. The chief then teleports the protagonist to enjoy a celebratory feast. The fake elves tell the protagonist that he still has time and to kill the chief while everyone is distracted with eating. The protagonist feels uneasy. Suddenly, a beautiful elf asks the protagonist if she may have a dance with him. She's definitely feeling him and clearly wants to jump his elven bones. She's never danced with a hero before. The protagonist agrees but admits he's not a great dancer. They both start to dance. The protagonist is having a great time and actually thinks the elf is kinda cute. He feels it's a shame that he'll die if he attacks the chief. Now he wants to come up with a plan to get out of the mission. The beautiful elf asks the protagonist what's wrong. He lies and says it's just because he's a terrible dancer. Then he asks for her name and she says her name is Lanny. The protagonist says he wants to show Lanny a magic trick and she gets all pumped up. Lanny gives the protagonist a bracelet but warns that if he does a bad job, she'll take it back. The protagonist walks away and tells everyone to keep their eyes on him. He calls it the human transformation. Lanny gets even more excited and yells, "Show them." The 3 fake elves didn't know Fern could use human magic. But they truly have no idea it's not just any magic. It's the human centipede. The protagonist says, "Watch closely," and takes off the crown, transforming back into a human. He throws the crown to Lanny to catch. All the real elves are hysterical while the fake ones plead with him to put the crown back on. The protagonist explains that he can become human only when he removes the crown. Then he says his 3 brothers also know the same magic and points at the fake elves. As long as they take off their crowns, he says, they'll turn into undead. All the elves' eyes turn blood red at the word undead and they stare at the 3 fake elves. Now terrified, the fake elves realize everyone is on high alert. The protagonist activates his skill and summons a door. "I'll be back once the fake elves reveal themselves," he says. He bids farewell to Lanny and vanishes through the door. The soldiers command the others to capture the 3 undead imposters. A tree vine extends and wraps around the fake elves, restraining them. The chief appears and tells the undead that humans have already infiltrated their ranks and led the mission. One of the fake elves looks confused, then his crown falls off. The chief examines the crown and realizes how highly enchanted it is. Still, he knows a certain magic that can eliminate all the imposters. He feels he owes the protagonist a favor. Meanwhile, Lanny is staring at the spot where the protagonist disappeared, but then a dark, sinister message appears. He won't be coming back. The protagonist sits on the floor and realizes that the door changes to suit its environment. He sees the human centipede and complains that he had to deal with the elven territory while it feasts. The human centipede is surprised the protagonist is still alive and asks how he survived. Still upset, the protagonist flips off the human centipede. A message pops up saying the human centipede is gifting the protagonist a powerful undead spell, but the protagonist refuses to be bought. The human centipede explains that he gifted the crown to the protagonist because humans are allies to the elves, and since he's undead, he would have died otherwise. As an apology, he gifts the protagonist a legacy nightmare crystal. The legacy nightmare crystal contains 3 top-tier evolutionary undead talents. A talent is a unique personal ability that can be used without expending energy. The protagonist can choose one to integrate into his soul and gain its power. The crystal is the foundation of the undead race and is extremely valuable. The reason the human centipede is still alive is because the undead want the crystal from him, but instead he is giving it to the protagonist. Knowing the undead will never get their hands on it, he laughs. Seeing the sincerity, the protagonist forgives him but warns there won't be a next time. Suddenly, a king-like undead appears and tells the protagonist to choose one of the ancient legacy talents and make it his own. Dark whispers. Novice, evolvable. With a corpse as a conduit, the dead must answer your call, crawling up from hell to tell you what they know. Only then will their souls find peace. Death is the most profound education. Sacred remains body. Novice, evolvable. Any force that can kill you will transform your body into the sacred remains body, temporarily immune to all death fate for 5 seconds. It can be used again after 1 day. Those who try to control your life and death will not meet a good end. Undead resurrection. Novice, evolvable. Create a soul flame and place it on a fallen undead. The soul flame will merge with the corpse, reviving it. There are many types of resurrection spells, but this is one of the most profound and primordial secret arts that can revive the undead. The fundamental power of the undead race. The protagonist chooses Dark Whispers, hoping the talent will help him gather information faster about who's trying to kill him. He breaks the crystal, and a burst of green light explodes outward. He is satisfied and instantly begins to hear the whispers of the undead. The human centipede is surprised by the protagonist's choice. No one in the past had ever chosen that talent. He then changes the subject and asks the protagonist about what happened in the elf village. The protagonist explains, realizing that he encountered the strongest high priest of the elven race, and that the original assassin should have been a female elf priestess. The human centipede realizes that the 3 undead who had been captured can no longer monitor or threaten him. He rushes off to attend to something. The protagonist summons his door and a system window appears saying he gained the evaluation title. 1 of US. Green title, excellent. By equipping this evaluation title, you gain the following buff. When you say to a target, "Hey, I'm one of us," the target will regard you as one of their own. It lasts for 10 seconds, after which the target will forget everything that just happened. This title can only be used once a day. The target's total attributes cannot exceed twice yours or they may resist the effect. Another system window appears. The protagonist has obtained the Bracelet of Natural Blessings, a gift from Lanny. It's a green, excellent quality item that boosts the protagonist's spiritual power when worn. Satisfied with all the items he's obtained, the protagonist stores them in his pocket. The next scene shows the protagonist's friend, Chun, doing his agility test. The protagonist cheers him on, and Chun thanks him, saying it's nothing he can't handle. Then, suddenly, a purple splash hits Chen's face. The test is over. Chun receives 71 points. Now it's the protagonist's turn. He stretches, puts one foot forward, and then takes off quickly when the teacher says, "Start." The protagonist moves fast and gracefully, as if it's effortless. Some students watch in shock. The protagonist reflects on all the experiences he has just gone through and feels that the test is easy. As the protagonist continues the test, two teachers stand on the sidelines watching from a distance. One of them comments that it's a shame the protagonist missed the first exam, but he definitely has potential. The other adds that if the protagonist can get a perfect score on the mental power test, he might be able to get into a prestigious high school. Then one of the examiners announces that the protagonist received a perfect score in agility. Although pleased, the teacher feels disappointed knowing the missed exam will lower the protagonist's overall score. However, the protagonist remains optimistic, saying it's okay, he's not giving up. He tells Chun to wash up and meet him in the classroom. In the next scene, the protagonist is lying with his head on a textbook, overwhelmed by everything he has to learn since he's not from that world. Suddenly, someone runs up and kicks his desk. The strong classmate has returned and reminds the protagonist that things aren't over. The protagonist asks if Zhao sent him, but the strong classmate replies that she doesn't want to talk to him. More students begin to gather around. The strong classmate challenges him, saying, "Let's see if your 2 agility points are stronger than my 2 strength points." The protagonist replies, "Why bother? We're all allies," and activates a trait called Ally. The students are hypnotized and begin saying they no longer want to fight him, they're allies. However, the protagonist quickly realizes the skill only lasts 10 seconds. As it wears off, the students snap out of it and say they want to kill him. The protagonist then devours the trait and a system window pops up, stating he gained 3 attribute points. He immediately uses them to increase his strength. A bright red aura radiates from the protagonist's body. The system window reads, "Increase successful. Strength increased from 1.2 to 5.2. One student grabs the protagonist from behind while the strong student charges from the front, channeling power into his fist. He punches the protagonist square in the stomach. Both of them freeze in shock, then they realize the strong student has broken all his fingers on impact. Pain shoots through the strong student. The protagonist breaks free from the student's grip and punches him to the floor. The other classmates are stunned by what they're seeing. The average untrained adult has a base strength and agility stat of 1. Strength as a base isn't just about raw muscle. It's about the resilience of your bones and muscles, the strength of your internal organs, the flexibility of your meridians, the explosive power of your flesh and blood, and the decay rate of your cells, basically your life force. All these factors combine to create an individual's strength stat. The protagonist lifts the not-so-strong student and says he's not the same as he used to be. He says he won't forgive the bullying and throws the student. All that can be heard is loud noise and yelling. The professor hears the commotion and rushes into the classroom to find the protagonist sitting down, surrounded by beaten classmates. With teary eyes, the protagonist says the other students were bullying him. The professor is confused, seeing the badly beaten students and struggling to understand how the protagonist could be the one who was bullied. Zhao, standing in the back, observes the scene and realizes she has miscalculated the protagonist's abilities. She doesn't understand how he was able to defeat all the students alone and begins to worry about how strong he has become. A female classmate asks Zhao if she regrets anything. Zhao reflects on the past and feels guilty about how she treated the protagonist. She thinks she should have treated him better and encouraged him instead of dismissing him. She wonders if things could have turned out differently. Zhao says there's no going back, her goal is complete. She believes the protagonist's qualifications should be revoked because he injured nearly a dozen students. Once he's out of the way, her future will be brighter. The beaten, not-so-strong student stares at Zhao and she starts to panic, fearing he wants to say something that will drag her into the situation. She begins fake crying and says she'll call the cops on Xinyi for him. The protagonist and the teacher feel at ease as the other students begin calling the police to report the incident. The teacher then tells the protagonist to come with him to his office. In the next scene, the two teachers who watched the protagonist take his exam are walking down the school hallway. They are interrupted by another teacher who informs them that the protagonist has gotten into a fight with a group of students. However, the protagonist had secretly recorded the fight from the very beginning. Both teachers are stunned by what they see in the video. The police are also watching the footage and ask the protagonist why he recorded it. He replies that he felt the bullies were going to beat him to death. One officer says that even though it was self-defense, they still need to assess how severely the other students were injured, as that may affect whether the protagonist will be charged. The teacher accompanying the protagonist protests, saying he shouldn't be taken away because he still has another exam to complete. If he goes now, it could jeopardize his future, especially since he already missed the first exam. The short man reveals himself to be the principal. He praises the protagonist for recording the fight, saying that if he hadn't, he would have been expelled. The taller man states that the protagonist is exceptional and far beyond the level of the other students. He hands the protagonist his personal business card and introduces himself as Chien Rushes, the director of the Human Martial Arts Group. He says he would like to extend an invitation for the protagonist to join. The protagonist is overjoyed. The Human Martial Arts Group is an elite organization that holds the key to high-level technology and martial arts mastery. For an ordinary person, it's like winning the lottery, a ticket out of a mundane life. This is the path to greatness. The director's aura is completely impenetrable. The protagonist feels he wouldn't be able to lay a finger on him even if he tried. The director then asks, "What's your strength stat?" The protagonist replies, 5. The principal and the teacher are both shocked to hear that the protagonist's strength is at level 5. The director says that's impressive. The protagonist begins to feel that if he's accepted into this elite organization, no one will dare go after him, especially with someone like the director strong enough to protect him. The director then declares he will use his personal recommendation slot for the protagonist, noting that a student with level 5 strength is a rare talent they cannot overlook. The protagonist eagerly says he would love to join. The director replies, "All right. Someone will be reaching out to you soon." Before leaving, the director asks, "What's your psychic power stat?" The protagonist answers, 3. Everyone reacts with disbelief at how high it is. The director suddenly becomes serious and asks the protagonist to demonstrate his ability, saying he should be able to move objects with his mind. The protagonist agrees and begins to move the chair in front of him. One of the police officers, clearly impressed, says they're leaving. He adds that the protagonist is destined for greatness with stats like that, and they don't want to interfere any further. After witnessing what the protagonist can do, the director is astonished and excited to have discovered such a treasure. He begins to sing and praise the protagonist, clearly overjoyed. Then the director says he wants to speak with the protagonist alone. He asks, "What's your end goal in life?" The protagonist thinks for a moment, then replies, "I want to be strong enough that no one can push me around and so I can always protect my family." The director loves his answer and says they'll begin training immediately. He tells the protagonist to attack him. The protagonist reallocates points to his strength and begins to emit a red aura. He gathers all the energy into his hand and throws a punch toward the director. The director stops it midair with his mind. This is a technique that immobilizes the attacker, the director explains. "I want to teach it to you." Then the director pulls out a gun and says, "Watch closely." He shoots himself in the head. But the bullet stops just before impact. "Even snipers can't penetrate this technique," he says. "I want you to join my Hidden Dragon project. It's an elite training program within the organization for rising stars." He adds that he plans to recommend the protagonist to 3 of the best high schools in the world. All the protagonist has to do is pass the rigorous entrance exams. The protagonist responds, "Only noble families get this kind of attention. Families who possess ancient knowledge, artifacts, and bloodline pacts passed down from the divine beings of old times. These ancient families possess more martial arts legacies than even our group does. They also control vast tracts of land, populations, and wealth. These noble families reign supreme, separated from the common folk by an insurmountable chasm." The protagonist wonders if Shinye's grandfather is from one of these families. The director explains that the purpose of the Hidden Dragon project is to help talented individuals hidden among the common people gain entrance to prestigious academies. Even if the protagonist fails, he'll still get into top-tier high schools. But if he succeeds in getting accepted into one of the top 3, the organization will fully support him, providing money, resources, and a career based on his talents. Once he retires, he can even work for the organization with high compensation. The protagonist now understands that this is a world where strength reigns supreme. He reflects on his parents' sacrifices and realizes he can finally repay them. The director hands him a tablet and says, "Sign and provide your fingerprint if you accept." The protagonist signs, then says he's rushing to his parents since he's still a minor and needs their signature as well. The director smiles and says he'll be back soon, before vanishing like the flash in the blink of an eye. The protagonist is astonished. The principal approaches and asks how the conversation with the director went. "I already signed," the protagonist says. The principal and teacher jump for joy. Suddenly, the protagonist receives a call on his cell phone. It's Officer Liu. He says he has more information about the case and wants the protagonist to come down to the station. The next scene shows Officer Liu telling the protagonist to take a seat and look at a picture. It shows a mysterious man at the scene of the incident. The protagonist zooms in and says he's never seen the man before. Officer Liu says it looks like the man is trying to activate something. He asks the protagonist if he was carrying anything that day, and the protagonist's expression turns worried. He then realizes that maybe the man is the one who activated the cursed statue. The protagonist decides to keep the information a secret and says no, he wasn't carrying anything. The officer says that's odd and pauses in thought. The protagonist feels like the officer knows something and senses a dark energy lurking around. Suddenly, the protagonist says he remembers something. His backpack was open, even though he clearly remembered zipping it closed before leaving school. The officer makes an ominous face and asks if he checked his backpack. The protagonist replies that he didn't and admits he probably should. Sensing that the officer might be about to do something, the protagonist reallocates all his stats to agility and prepares to escape if anything out of the ordinary happens. Just then, the phone in the room suddenly rings, startling him. The protagonist says he should leave while the officer takes the call, but the officer tells him to stay put. A voice on the phone says, "It's time for the officer to die." A red light appears on the officer's stomach. The officer realizes the activation is coming from outside and immediately jumps out the window. The police station's alarms go off, announcing that an intruder has breached the premises. The protagonist looks out the window the officer jumped from and sees the mysterious man and Officer Liu facing off with the ocean in the background. The protagonist is confused because they're supposed to be in the middle of the city. The protagonist takes a closer look at the mystery man and realizes it's not the same man from the photo taken the night of the incident. The man says he's there to avenge all the members the officer had slaughtered from his church. Officer Liu replies that he's busy right now and that if there's an issue, they can talk about it later. The man says the officer's life is all the explanation he needs. Suddenly, everything returns to normal, and both men are gone. The protagonist starts to feel that strange dark energy again. His eyes turn green, and a system window pops up. "Your necromantic ability, Murmurs of the Dark, has been activated. Your question compels any soul tied to a body in this location to return and answer. If they refuse, they'll never find peace." The protagonist is shocked to realize there's a body in Officer Liu's office. A random voice thanks him. The protagonist is startled and asks who's there. The voice is coming from inside the cabinet, but it sounds familiar. The protagonist is confused, and then the voice says, "How pathetic." The hunter gets hunted by its own prey, and then the prey dresses up to look like him. The protagonist opens the cabinet and sees Officer Liu's dead spirit. He says the man in the photo killed him. That man is an assassin. While Officer Liu tried to defend himself, his gun jammed and he was killed. The assassin then disguised himself as the officer to lure the protagonist to the station. The protagonist realizes the assassin wants answers because the curse didn't work and he survived. The protagonist explains that the imposter was actually fighting another individual who was after Liu. Officer Liu explains that the place the protagonist saw was called an anomaly, a separate world that connects to their own. But then there's also calamity when monsters from other worlds invade theirs. These monsters have the power to cause mass devastation. The officer talks about how a previous disaster was covered up as an earthquake that killed 13 million people, but in reality, it was a calamity. Officer Liu says he doesn't have much time. He warns that the anomaly was a small one and the assassin imposter will return soon. The officer gives the protagonist a code and tells him to go to the armory on the 3rd floor. Use that access code and write the truth on the wall, then he'll receive protection. The system window appears again. The other party has shared everything. Their soul is now departing. The protagonist realizes why no officer wanted to help at his house, because they can be easily killed if they aren't strong enough. He puts the hat back on Officer Liu's body and closes the cabinet. The protagonist feels it's his fault and vows to avenge Officer Liu so he can rest in peace. Suddenly there's a knock at the door. Someone tells the protagonist to leave because an anomaly has just occurred. A group of police officers open the door. Captain Wang tells the others to head downstairs while he has a chat with Officer Liu and Xinyi. They agree and leave. Captain Wang looks around and notices that Officer Liu's body has been moved. He wonders if Xinyi moved it. Then suddenly, Captain Wang moves super fast to search the room. Captain Wang is actually one of the assassins and believes he can do a better job than the previous one who tried to go after Xinyi. He uses the walkie-talkie to instruct all officers to go after Xinyi, claiming he suspects him to be an accomplice in the incident. Captain Wang closes the door and disappears. The protagonist's door appears and he looks out to see if the coast is clear. The protagonist knows the killer had accomplices and says that instead of hiding in the nightmare realm, it's better to get revenge on the killers. He jumps out the window to get to level 3 so he can report everything. He finds the wall where he needs to input the code. Captain Wang suddenly appears behind him with a weapon. The protagonist makes up an excuse, saying he had extra homework, and tries to enter the code. Captain Wang sees what the protagonist is trying to do and doesn't understand how he got the code that directly sends a message to the World Government HQ. Captain Wang throws his weapon at the protagonist, but it gets blocked by the protagonist's power to summon a door. Captain Wang keeps charging toward him, but as he gets closer, the protagonist summons another door, which Captain Wang slams into. The protagonist finally finishes entering the code. The alarm system says passcode verified. Voice, this is Kunlun, the world government's top AI. Initiating emergency assessment. Scanning the area. Body of Luo Feichuan located. Confirmed, false identity detected, Captain Wang Xuemu of the Major Crimes Unit. Dispatching nearest high-ranking practitioner, District Manager Dien Russian mobilized. Given the severity of the situation, immediate termination authorized. In 30 seconds, the imposter posing as Wang Xuemu will be executed. Countdown commencing. 29, 28. The imposter, Captain Wang, says 30 seconds is more than enough time to get rid of the protagonist. He grabs the protagonist and raises his fist to strike him. Suddenly, Director Qian appears and unleashes a powerful attack that obliterates the imposter, Captain Wang. In the next scene, Director Qian is seated, questioning how Xinyi knew the code to alert World Government Headquarters. The protagonist replies that Officer Liu had given it to him before his death because he wanted to make sure Xinyi was safe. Director Qian explains that hitmen and the Silent Church were after Officer Liu and the protagonist was lucky to have survived. The protagonist then asks Director Qian why Officer Liu didn't use the code himself to request help from headquarters. Director Qian reveals that Officer Liu didn't realize his weapon had been compromised. A virus had been planted in the system, rendering it inoperable. Someone close to Officer Liu was involved. Director Qian tells the protagonist that he's part of his group now and warns him to always be wary of those with ill intentions. He then says they're leaving to meet with the protagonist's parents. The protagonist asks why they're leaving and questions whether he should stay to deal with the situation. Director Qian replies that he doesn't want to remain because anything from the anomaly could come back, pretending to be human, and dealing with that could be a serious problem. Suddenly, Director Qian gets a call. The person on the line asks him to run a background check on someone named Xiao Minyu and to determine what connection they might have with Officer Liu. Director Qian looks stunned by the operation he's being asked to investigate. In the next scene, the protagonist is seen sitting with his parents as they tell him they never wanted to hide the truth about his family origins. They explain that his father comes from a prestigious family known as the illustrious Sanjin Shun clan, one of the few families that inherited divine powers and sacred artifacts. His mother explains that his father was once a prodigy but lost his strength and abilities while attempting to master ancient techniques. That was how he ended up meeting her in the city. The protagonist's grandfather had wanted his father to marry into another prestigious family, but he refused and chose to marry his mother instead. As a result, he was cast out of the clan. The protagonist's father then explains that the reason they're telling him all this now is because he possesses talent that goes far beyond the ordinary. He says that if they show the grandfather the protagonist's abilities, he could be accepted as a clan disciple, gaining access to incredible resources and privileges. However, if he chooses to join the human martial arts group, he will lose that opportunity forever. Ultimately, the choice is his to make, and they will support him no matter what. The protagonist thinks it over and tells his parents he has decided to join the human martial arts group. They are shocked. He explains that he doesn't want to beg his grandfather to take them back and that if they've made it this far without him, then he can succeed without his grandfather too. His parents are moved by his words and delighted by his decision. The protagonist then reflects on his memories of Shinyi and recalls how, whenever they visited the Shin clan estate, his grandfather always treated them coldly. The only good memories he has from those visits were playing with kids his own age. In the next scene, director Chien says, "Contract signed. Welcome Shinyi to the Human Martial Arts Group." He informs the protagonist that he'll be participating in the entrance exams for the top 3 prestigious martial arts schools in a few days and asks him to stay at the group's facility in the meantime. The protagonist's parents are thrilled for him and agree to the arrangement. Meanwhile, Zhao is seen posting misinformation online in an attempt to tarnish the protagonist's reputation. Pleased with the false story she created, she feels that Shunyi will finally get what he deserves. But then she receives a phone alert saying her post has been flagged and that if she continues to spread lies and misinformation about the protagonist, the Human Martial Arts Group will pursue legal action. Confused, she checks online and sees a post from the principal congratulating Shunyi on securing a contract with the Human Martial Arts Group. Zhao is stunned and begins to pity herself. In the next scene, the director and the protagonist arrive at the Human Martial Arts Group building. Director Chien informs him that he received 5 merit points, which can be used to purchase government-issued items. However, since Shinyi is underage, he isn't eligible for merit points. Still, they sent him a reward package for his role in the recent incident at the police department. The protagonist is excited, hoping it contains a technique he can use to defend himself from the assassins targeting him. Director Chien tells him he is now officially a member of the Human Martial Arts Group and promises to investigate the assassination attempts further. He advises Shinyi to stay within the facility for his own safety. The protagonist also receives his monthly stipend for joining. Later, Shinyi sees his favorite celebrity on a TV monitor congratulating him on joining the Human Martial Arts Group. She says she'll be calling him Lil Brother from now on and invites him to her next concert with VIP tickets. Overwhelmed, the protagonist is thrilled to see that his room contains everything he loves and even more amazed that the Human Martial Arts Group has brought him closer to his celebrity crush. He steps out of his room, takes in the view, and vows to visit the Nightmare Realm that night to level up. With the entrance exams only 2 days away, he knows he must grow stronger and cannot afford to fail. The protagonist summons a door and walks in to find the human centipede broken into pieces and slowly dying. The human centipede asks the protagonist if he has any more tonic, but he says no, though he promises to return. The protagonist feels he should save him since the centipede offers valuable exchange items, then leaves, saying he'll be back. 2 hours later, the protagonist returns with a huge tank containing calcium gluconate and a mix of liquid calcium, magnesium, and zinc to help restore the human centipede's bones. He should be as good as new. Suddenly, the walls begin to crumble. The human centipede says that the elves and humans are battling outside and that the path therein is a secret passage. In a hurry, the human centipede throws the protagonist a spatial ring and tells him to wear it so he can hide inside. After the protagonist enters the ring, he disperses the door just as an explosion erupts. The human centipede explains that the protagonist can absorb the water tank and soak inside it while in the spatial ring. The protagonist says he's heading back into the human centipede world and needs his cooperation to find special items since he's skilled at looting. He asks the human centipede if he has any gear that can mask his aura so he can pretend to be an undead as well. The human centipede summons a variety of gear and the protagonist selects something he can wear. The gear even allows him to summon a skeletal warhorse. He also acquires a mask imbued with a potent death aura which enhances his disguise. Now, the protagonist officially looks like a bona fide undead warrior. He summons another door and walks inside. The protagonist opens the door back into the secret passage of the undead world only to find it completely destroyed. He takes out the dagger he obtained in the Elven lands to increase his protection. Crawling out of the rubble, he finds himself suddenly surrounded by humans. They are about to attack him, but he quickly removes his mask, revealing that he is human. Despite this, the humans don't trust him. They call him a traitor allied with the undead and attempt to attack. The protagonist uses the dagger to defend himself and one of the humans suddenly recognizes it. It's the dagger named Nightshade, one of the human scout daggers. Designed for assassinations, Nightshade is only carried by individuals considered trustworthy by humanity. The humans immediately stop their attack and begin to believe the protagonist is an ally. One of them asks if he needs assistance, and the protagonist accepts, saying that he does. The man introduces himself as Roman and offers a solo survival pack to help. Suddenly, a man on horseback appears, saying he still doesn't trust the protagonist and demands to know his mission. The protagonist asks who is speaking, and the man responds that his name is Baron Warren of Southern Eagle's Castle. Warren declares that he intends to capture and torture the protagonist, but the protagonist calmly summons a door, says he'll remember Warren's name when he returns, and vanishes through it. Warren is left confused, unsure of where the protagonist went. Another man comments that they've heard an assassin recently joined the battle, one who mastered the art of hiding in the shadows. Warren now grows fearful of what may come and orders his men to retreat for the time being. The protagonist falls through his summoned door and mutters that he won't forget Warren. He's glad he had placed that door earlier as a safety measure.